Hearing this, Master Dian San finally understood that his elaborate display of paper figures to ward off demons earlier was completely useless in the end. The root cause is here, because the person who came was not a demon at all. It seems these Japanese devils are as insidious and cunning as ever. The old man talked to himself, which made Li Zhu feel confused. However, it's pointless to talk more about this. Master Dian San quickly changed the subject, saying her pulse was steady and her body was fine. Now that things are clear, then we should understand what we, father and son, need to do to help Li Zhu. Li Zhu was overjoyed to hear this. She gratefully said she just needed to borrow a cell phone so she could contact the embassy. Jing Dian heard this and immediately handed over the phone Li Zhu had given him before, and also mentioned the previous incident in passing. Although Li Zhu was a bit confused by these words, it was insignificant. She repeatedly thanked him and then dialed the U.S. Embassy's phone number. After a brief exchange to confirm the address, the embassy promised to within 3 days mail Li Zhu's lost luggage over. Coincidentally, Li Zhu's luggage was picked up by a cleaner and handed over to the police. And the police, based on the identification information, notified the embassy. This is why the contact this time was so smooth. Seeing that things were settled, father and son were both relieved. They warmly invited Li Zhu to stay here for a few days and wait for her luggage to be delivered. Then the old man went to prepare lunch and said that for dinner they would catch a chicken to stir fry and eat. Before long, lunch was served. Under the shade of the tree were 2 simple side dishes and a bowl of special large bowl-wide noodles. Just looking at it, a feeling of leisure and carefree came along with it. Jing Dian ate heartily and kept smacking his lips, just like he hadn't eaten for many years. But attentive viewers have already noticed that Jing Dian's lips had turned bluish-purple. The old man saw this and sighed, covering his forehead, intuitively feeling like he had fed a pig. Li Zhu, after all, is a girl, eating elegantly and quietly. But even so, she still finished 3 bowls straight. Master Dian San was happy about this, saying directly there was no need to be shy. Looking at Jing Dian, who was still eating heartily, Li Zhu chuckled. She leaned over and discussed with Jing Dian, saying she wanted to take a walk together after the meal. Although Jing Dian agreed, he picked up another bowl of noodles, because this bowl in front of him was the first bowl he could truly eat into his stomach. And this scene really surprised Li Zhu a little. After the meal, the two revisited the same places. Just like before, Li Zhu sighed with admiration along the way, as if she was already captivated by the beautiful mountain scenery. But somehow, the resting place Li Zhu chose was exactly the same as last time. Jing Dian saw this, and his expression suddenly became strange. Fortunately, Li Zhu didn't notice these things. The two sat on the grass and chatted happily. Of course, as they chatted, they naturally started talking about some family matters. Hearing Li Zhu ask about his parents, Jing Dian frowned. He then confirmed that this older sister's amnesia was quite thorough. But thinking about it, Jing Dian inexplicably felt a burst of heat, because he remembered once the soft and warm touch when pressed against her chest. Then his face suddenly turned red. Now, even if Li Zhu didn't want to look, she noticed it at once. She asked with a smile, "Why is your face red?" Unexpectedly, Jing Dian, this fellow, actually inexplicably, started telling his tragic childhood story. And it was exactly the same as what he said last time. After telling it, this kid still sneakily glanced at Li Zhu with ill intentions. But the result did disappoint him somewhat, because Li Zhu didn't look at him at all, but was gazing blankly ahead. Suddenly, Li Zhu turned her head and said something. which was that she also had never seen her parents. That slightly sad expression made Jing Dian's heart tremble. Even the budding mischievous desire vanished without a trace in an instant. Until this moment, Jing Dian realized that this older sister was actually adopted by foreigners. She had never seen her biological parents' faces, only knew the place of birth written on the adoption certificate. So after 20 years away, she returned to this place, just to feel the atmosphere of her hometown. Jing Dian nodded thoughtfully and started asking about Li Zhu's job. But the result did surprise him somewhat, because Li Zhu's job really was archaeology. Jing Dian was immediately disgusted when he heard this. He didn't expect this older sister, in various ways, could be related to the tomb raiding profession. But this time he really misunderstood, because Li Zhu studied Oriental ancient history and also minored in archaeology and cultural relic restoration. However, even so, she became even more curious. In her opinion, she had indeed been here during her amnesia, revealed many secrets as well. It was really like Alice in Wonderland in a dream. But as they chatted, Jing Dian's hand suddenly changed color. And then, in the next moment, it suddenly moved to Li Zhu's thigh, becoming dishonest. This time, both of them screamed at the same time. Jing Dian was startled and quickly explained that his left hand was out of control. But these words sounded like Arabian Nights to Li Zhu. She thought this guy was playing some tricks. Unexpectedly, as soon as she finished speaking, Jing Dian's black hand reached out again. Good heavens! This scene directly scared Li Zhu into standing up, and Jing Dian was even more panicked and ran to the side, preparing to create some distance. But before he could run 2 steps, he suddenly froze strangely in place. Unexpectedly, that guy Zhu Yi actually controlled his legs at this moment. Jing Dian saw this and exclaimed that things were bad. He quickly told Li Zhu to run away quickly, because he seemed like he was going to do something improper. To prove that he was not lying, he also lifted his clothes and showed his belly, preparing to prove his innocence. But this scene was really ridiculous in Li Zhu's eyes. What's more, Jing Dian's belly was white, and there was nothing there. This is bad. Jing Dian was sweating profusely, not knowing how to explain for a moment. And Li Zhu, on the other hand, had no idea that disaster was imminent, and thought Jing Dian was joking and trying to make her happy. But before she finished laughing, Jing Dian ran over quickly. This time Li Zhu was a bit at a loss. Could it be that she was also forced to be an actress once? But pretending to run away would really be embarrassing. But although she thought so, she also noticed Jing Dian's solemn expression. So helplessly, she had to obey and flee towards the village. Unconsciously, 2 days had passed. Li Zhu also received her package. Then she said goodbye to father and son, and embarked on her journey to find her roots. This day, 2 groups of people arrived at Master Dian San's doorstep at the same time, although the vehicles of the 2 groups looked somewhat different. In the old man's eyes, there was no distinction between rich and poor. The grandparents and grandson came from the next village. Their purpose was to hope Master Dian San could help look at the eye problem. The old grandma said, these days, her vision was always hazy, and it was getting more and more blurry. Now, she could only see a hazy shadow, but strangely, her eyes didn't hurt or itch. She didn't know what the problem was. Master Dian San had a rough judgment in his mind when he heard this. He instructed Jing Dian to fetch a pair of new chopsticks, and then carefully looked at the old grandma's eyes. The symptoms were obvious. It was excessive dampness in the inner canthus, caused by accumulated summer heat, which is commonly known as the disease for Yin-Yang. As the name suggests, it's an eye ailment that appears after the start of dog days, known as Jiangmu disease. After confirming with the grandfather and grandson, The old man offered his own advice, which was, when the sun is at its harshest, don't go out for a stroll. Furthermore, the old man also instructed the grandson to go into the woods and look for freshly shed snakeskin. He specifically emphasized that the snakeskin must be new, and it must be complete. Then soak it in white liquor. Soak a clean towel in it and apply it around the eyes. This way, it will heal faster. If you really can't find this kind of snakeskin, it's better to have nothing than a poor substitute. Just applying the liquor alone will also work. After receiving Master Dian San's advice, the grandfather and grandson repeatedly expressed their gratitude. Then they slowly left. It was only then that the old man began to ask the man beside him about his purpose. Upon hearing this, the man hurriedly explained that he was from Shi County and was Mr. Liu's driver. He had come this time to pick up the old man to perform the first 7-day memorial service for Mr. Liu's mother. Mentioning this, the old man immediately understood. Time is of the essence. Then let's depart right away. But before leaving, he still had some things to tell Jing Dian. Of course, the old man's way of instructing was unique. After all, this trip would take several days, and he was worried this guy would cause trouble again. So he directly grabbed Jing Dian's ear and rattled off a list of things he was not allowed to do. But Jing Dian at this moment was clearly experiencing pain and pleasure simultaneously. Therefore, as soon as the old man left, this kid couldn't keep up the pretense of being simple anymore. As soon as the door was closed, he happily started humming a little tune. To an outsider's ear, it probably sounded like ghostly gibberish. So, he spread out a mat in the shade of a tree, placed 2 tomatoes beside it, and just like that, the blissful life of chilling out began. Seeing this, Zhuyi was immediately speechless. Are you planning to kick rice again, you lazy bum? Jing Dian didn't bother with him, retorting, mind your own business. And then he launched into some game. Zhuyi was really fed up with this. Pathetic. Always just lying around at home. Aren't you afraid of getting moldy? But Jing Dian still turned a deaf ear to all this, because he knew Zhuyi's sly intentions all too well. If he actually listened and went out to have fun, this guy would probably just go chasing after women again. Hearing this jab, Zhuyi was furious. After all, he wouldn't even glance at the girls in the village. And Li Zhu, whom he finally started to fancy, had actually left just like that. What a pity. Hearing this, Jing Dian didn't say a word and threw a punch. If it weren't for Zhuyi's restlessness, how could he have been tied up by the old man for 2 nights for no reason? Zhuyi, hearing this, was somewhat. His mind raced, and he got an idea. How about I teach you a few kung fu moves? Jing Dian was a little disdainful of this. What? You think you're so powerful? Zhuyi smirked. Have you forgotten that night when I just used a flying knee and took down that little Jap? Mentioning this, Jing Dian immediately remembered. That flying knee was incredibly powerful, yet it didn't hurt his knee at all. Truly amazing. But if you're so powerful, why didn't you just take down the chap from the start? Zhuyi sighed, a sound from deep within his throat. Because at that time, I was just a being of the underworld, unable to attack a human's living body. So I could only scare him a little, and maybe touch a bit of hair, which is already dead matter anyway. My later display of great power, wasn't it only achieved by borrowing Jing Dian's physical body? After this explanation, Jing Dian finally understood. However, he was still a bit confused. Clearly, those 2 bad guys were swallowed by Whitestone Beach that night. But why later? Did Sister Li Zhu float up on Yuan Lake? Unfortunately, Zhuyi didn't know. Of course, even if he did know, he wouldn't dare to reveal it. After all, he only has a few hundred years of cultivation. And most of the time he just sleeps for a few years and then wakes up for a few years. He's nowhere near as magically powerful as outsiders make him out to be. Hearing this, Jing Dian immediately became dispirited. He flopped down onto the mat and started his journey to rank up in the game. However, not long after, a girl arrived at the door. Coincidentally, it was Zhang Miling, who was betrothed to Jing Dian in a ghost marriage. After knocking on the door a few times and getting no response, Zhang Miling got angry and directly added the word broken before Jing Dian's name. Of course, Jing Dian had already recognized the voice of his nemesis, so he was too lazy to even acknowledge her. But when Zhang Miling pushed the door open and walked in, he realized he was in trouble. He quickly pulled down his shirt to cover his belly, afraid that Zhuyi would get a look at this girl. But in reality, no matter how much he tried to hide, it was futile. And Zhuyi was already sighing in admiration. This little girl is really something, Jing Dian exclaimed in alarm. Quickly clutching his shirt, he asked Miling, "What are you doing here?" His tone clearly conveyed a desire to keep her at arm's length. Miling, however, had come only to deliver a basket of buns. These were freshly steamed by her mother, so she was asked to bring some over. However, before Jing Dian could get up and take them, he was shocked to discover that his hands had changed color. Summer arrived with cicadas buzzing everywhere, and it was once again the season for Zhuyi's amorous desires. Because of Miss Li Zhu's departure, with no outlet for his urges, he was heartbroken. Plus, he completely looked down on the village girls, so he had to urge Jing Dian to go out and wander around to ease the restlessness in his heart. But coincidentally, just a few minutes later, a very lively girl delivered herself right to their doorstep. The visitor was none other than Zhang Miling. Due to a health issue, she had once been engaged to Jing Dian in a ghost marriage. However, even so, it didn't lessen their mutual dislike for each other. And this time, she had come, only at her mother's request, to deliver a basket of freshly steamed beef buns. But little did she know, if she lingered for even a moment longer, she might be in for some serious trouble. Because at this moment, Zhuyi had already taken control of Jing Dian's hands, preparing to do something bad. Jing Dian was terrified. He quickly warned Miling not to come closer. As soon as he said this, neither of them was happy. Miling scolded him for being ungrateful, coming with good intentions to deliver buns, only to be treated like this. Go to hell. Zhuyi even threatened in a low voice. You brat, don't you dare ruin my good time. Then, in the next moment, Zhuyi shifted his control to Jing Dian's feet. This sudden change terrified Jing Dian, turning his face green. Fortunately, his hands were now free. He immediately lay back and tightly hugged his legs to prevent himself from getting up. Well, now, Zhuyi was completely frustrated and enraged. But from Miling's perspective, she just thought Jing Dian was being utterly ridiculous, striking such an unsightly pose. How annoying. Just then, Jing Dian, who knew Zhang Miling's temperament well, suddenly had a flash of inspiration, because in his memory, this girl always liked to do the opposite of what he did. If that's the case, then he had a plan. Thinking of this, Jing Dian directly yelled loudly at Miling, "Come here." As expected, this move immediately worked. Zhang Miling was furious. She dropped the basket and stormed off in a huff. She even cursed as she walked away, saying she would never speak to him again. Seeing this, Jing Dian finally breathed a sigh of relief. Only Zhuyi was left behind, muttering resentfully. Coincidentally, Zhang Miling's angry departure caught the attention of some of their friends. Sensing some juicy gossip, they all quickly slipped into Jing Dian's house. Xiao Gai started yelling as soon as he entered. noisily questioning Jingdian if he had done anything excessive to Zhang Miling. "Mind your own business." Jingdian rolled his eyes at them, too lazy to answer. However, the friends also knew that Jingdian and that girl had always been at odds, so they just assumed the two had another quarrel. But Si Yan frowned and said seriously, "Jingdian is no longer in the same league as us." Hearing this, the friends understood immediately. They immediately pinned Jingdian down to check his virginity. As for Kun Kun, he had his eyes on the basket of buns. And you know what? These buns really smelled delicious. After a bit of commotion, the friends finally calmed down. The reason they came to find Jingdian was to ask him to go splash around in the reservoir with them. Hearing this, Jingdian's heart skipped a beat, because his grandpa had specifically told him before leaving to stay away from such places. So Jingdian was now extremely scared. Then cheerfully, he went with them, sneaking off to the reservoir. Zhao Gai was in charge of lookout, checking in all directions. He didn't spot any busybody old women. So, he stood on high ground, imitating the posture of an old general, and commanded everyone to disarm immediately. Of course, disarm was just a figure of speech. After some whooping and hollering, the friends all stripped naked. Moreover, Zhao Gai suggested they start with a Danshan warm-up ritual. This made Jingdian worried, because he had just released water before coming, and his reserves were quite low. This so-called Danshan warm-up ritual was to rinse their navels with 37-degree golden tea water urine from their bellies, supposedly to prevent stomachaches after swimming. Watching his friends perform the strange ritual and already dart into the reservoir, Jingdian became extremely anxious. Fortunately, after a long struggle, the stuff finally came. That's right. Jingdian's aim was excellent, hitting the bullseye. But before Jingdian could even feel happy, Zhuir suddenly exclaimed in alarm. It angrily told Jingdian to stop his magic and stop peeing on its navel. Even as it said this, there was a hint of pleading in its tone. Hearing this, Jingdian inexplicably chuckled. Hee hee. Now I've finally got your weakness. You little rascal. See how I'll handle you from now on. I thought something bad might happen with these boys swimming in the reservoir. But unexpectedly, everything was peaceful until evening. Could it be that Grandpa's warning was an overreaction? The sky gradually darkened. Since no one was cooking, Jingdian went to the village store at the entrance, as his grandpa had instructed. A braised chicken, a bag of peanuts, and a bottle of iced red tea were to be Jingdian's simple dinner tonight. The store owner beamed with delight, praising Jingdian for his good taste. As instructed, the owner quickly added this bill to Old Man Dian's tab. Then he chatted casually, saying he envied the old man's skill, that just performing the seventh-day ritual could earn him about 1,000 yuan, which was much more profitable than running his small store. Jingdian, always being mischievous, directly asked the owner if he wanted to learn. The owner, who was just being polite, was immediately intrigued by this. His curiosity was instantly piqued. What? Is your grandpa taking apprentices? Unexpectedly, Jingdian grinned slyly. He said he'd teach you if you waive this bill. I'll teach you. Goodness gracious. As soon as he said this, the owner's face turned green. So, are you kidding me, kid? Seeing that things were going south, Jingdian laughed and ran away. As soon as he got home, Jingdian couldn't wait to start eating. But as soon as he opened his mouth, he felt a strange resistance in his mouth. Sure enough, he looked down and found that Zhuir was being naughty again. It was loudly declaring that it should eat first. Hearing this, Jingdian wouldn't stand for it. He directly shook the iced red tea beside him, saying he would pour some boy's urine into it later for it to enjoy. Sure enough, as soon as these words came out, Zhu was immediately silenced. It could only stare at the chicken leg in Jingdian's hand, seething with helpless fury. But eventually, it couldn't resist anymore, begging Jingdian to at least leave a chicken leg for it to taste. Unexpectedly, Jingdian wouldn't listen at all, and even said that Zhu recent behavior meant it didn't even deserve the chicken tail. These words directly stunned Zhu. No, this isn't right. How the hell did I become his servant? But now that it was under his roof, it really had no choice. Helplessly, Zhu said it would give him a pledge of allegiance. Jingdian was taken aback by this. What the heck is this pledge of allegiance thing? Zhu hurriedly explained, saying it could take Jingdian to find a treasure tomorrow, but on the condition that he had to leave a chicken leg for it tonight. So the next day, Jingdian was tricked into setting off. After leaving the village and walking for 5 li, they still hadn't reached their destination. But if they went further, it would be Jidin, the area Grandpa had repeatedly warned him not to go to. Unexpectedly, Zhu said, "The treasure is right there." Then, Jingdian saw a solitary ginkgo tree. Could it be that this tree is special? Zhu sneered, and said, "Haven't you noticed that within 3 feet under this tree, not a single blade of grass grows?" Hearing this, Jingdian suddenly understood. He immediately thought of a phenomenon his grandpa had mentioned, which was the situation where no grass dares to compete with it for Earth's energy. Seeing Jingdian stunned, Zhu said, "There used to be a 1,000-year-old ginkgo tree here." Hearing this, Jingdian rolled his eyes. "Who are you kidding? A 1,000-year-old ginkgo tree? Then where is it? Even my grandpa never mentioned it." Zhu was too lazy to argue with him. "How long has your family been here?" "I've been here for hundreds of years." Zhu's one sentence left Jingdian speechless. Then it began to tell the story of that ginkgo tree. It said that the age of this 1,000-year-old ginkgo tree was even earlier than the ancient city of Lazong. Its shade alone covered an acre. Every summer, the ginkgo tree would attract all the lightning strikes in the surrounding area. Therefore, the people were grateful for its benevolence. Until 1969, a change occurred here. At that time, a chainsaw team came to Lao Zhanggu. They claimed they were going to cut down all the trees on Ghost King Ridge beyond Jidin to eradicate local feudal superstitions. Hearing this, Jingdian also felt a chill down his spine, because in legends, Ghost King Ridge was said to be the place where the king of hell tethered ghosts. How dare they mess with it? Unsurprisingly, this 1,000-year-old ginkgo tree became the first stop in their logging plan. Under the chainsaw, in less than 15 minutes, the tree that had taken 1,000 years to grow crashed to the ground. It rolled all the way down the gully, exposed to wind, sun, insect damage, and rain, until it completely rotted away 5 years later. But the problem wasn't what happened after it rotted, but rather when it fell. When those people cut down the ginkgo tree, more than 10 wild rabbits came running frantically, and they all crashed into the thick tree stump and died. This scene is unsettling, but the chainsaw captain didn't care at all, and even told people to take the hairs back and stew them. That night, they got drunk on liquor and boldly declared they would march on Ghost King Ridge. Then something strange happened. In the latter half of the night, heavy snow blanketed the sky. It didn't stop until dawn. People were surprised and discovered the captain was gone. After searching for some time, they found under a tree stump a body that was already ice cold. The body was kneeling, naked and kneeling properly before the stump. In 1969, a 1,000-year-old ginkgo tree was felled by the chainsaw team, perhaps as karmic retribution. Something terrifying happened that very night. That night, heavy snow blanketed the sky, dropping as much as 3 feet. The chainsaw team captain, somehow, was found frozen to death naked by the stump. News of this caused widespread panic. They no longer dared to shout slogans like "Clear-cut Ghost King Ridge," and especially the following night. They didn't dare close their eyes to sleep. But even so, some men were still drawn to the stump as if possessed. Had their teammates not tied them up, more than just the captain might have died there. So, the chainsaw team never dared to stay there again. As soon as dawn broke, they fled in terror, scared out of their wits. The following spring, villagers, grateful for the old tree, came on their own and covered the stump with soil. After a few spring rains, a new sprout emerged from the old stump. Now, over 50 years have passed. Jing Dian, hearing this story, was deeply shocked, but looking at the ginkgo tree before him, he couldn't help but frown, because no matter what, a tree over 50 years old shouldn't look like this. Looking at it now, it looks like a sapling of only 2 or 3 years. Seeing that Jing Dian had discovered this key issue, Zhu Yi was greatly relieved. He told Jing Dian to look down at the ground, saying that the large patch under the ginkgo tree where nothing grows was where the original stump was. Just dig down in the middle of the clearing, and you'll find something. Fortunately, after decades of rain and erosion, the stump had become quite rotten. After a few scoops, Jing Dian dug a small pit, and inside, something golden gleamed. When he took it out to look, Jing Dian realized it was a gold 3-edged arrowhead. Seeing this, Zhu Yi exclaimed, "That's it. This is the treasure we're after." It's a long story. This arrowhead was left by that chainsaw team. Back then, after they fled, they consulted a master, raised some money, forged a pure gold arrowhead, and hammered it into the tree's core. In the 5 elements theory, wood is overcome by metal. So this ginkgo tree's new sprout grew very slowly. Hearing this, Jing Dian was indignant. "In that case," he said, "I'll act on behalf of heaven and confiscate this arrowhead." Zhu Yi was overjoyed, of course. He was already fantasizing about selling the arrowhead and buying hundreds of roast chickens to feast on. Then, Jing Dian bowed deeply to the ginkgo tree to say goodbye and leave. Zhu Yi, on the other hand, was extremely smug, showing off the whole way. He even told Jing Dian to cooperate well in the future, and there would be plenty of benefits. Jing Dian vaguely agreed, but the next moment, he was almost brushed on the nose by a dark shadow. He stared and realized the person looked familiar. It looked like the fellow who brought his grandma for treatment the day before. If he remembered correctly, Grandpa had told him to go to the back mountain to find fresh, whole snake skins to wipe his grandma's eyes. Thinking of this, Jing Dian called out a greeting from afar, but he didn't expect. The young man just glanced at him in terror and kept running. What an impolite fellow. Jing Dian was a bit annoyed. He curiously looked in the direction the young man had come from and was shocked to see that direction was the entrance to the dense forest of Ghost King Ridge. Good heavens! Could this young man have gotten mixed up with something sinister? Zhu Yi glanced over and told Jing Dian, saying the young man was already plagued by resentment. As soon as he said this, Jing Dian was stunned, because in all his life, he'd never heard of resentment as such a thing. Seeing this, Zhu Yi knew it was complicated to explain, so he lent Jing Dian his eyes. As soon as he said this, Jing Dian's eye sockets turned purplish black. Then, he saw 2 bright red lines of blood in the air, and this was the so-called resentment. These 2 threads of resentful energy stretched out from Ghost King Ridge, firmly wrapped around the body of the young man who fled. By the time Jing Dian looked back, the young man had vanished. What should we do? Seeing Jing Dian's expression, Zhu Yi immediately understood. Do you want to help him? But it looks like we can't catch up with him now. In that case, we can only go against the direction and explore the dense forest of Ghost King Ridge. Hearing this, Jing Dian was startled. He wouldn't dare to barge into Ghost King Ridge. After all, there are too many stories and superstitions about that place.